My husband and I had gone to see a condo owned by a foreigner. I let Leonard take the lead, staying quiet, playing the role of the polite wife who didn't understand a word of German. And then one sentence drifted through the air and froze me in place. Welcome to the Mama Stories channel. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now settle in and enjoy this story. Ariel Stevens gently closed the bedroom door and twisted the lock, just in case. From the back of the closet, beneath a neatly folded stack of sheets and pillowcases, she pulled out a worn language textbook. The cover was bent, corners softened from use. Inside, the margins were full of her careful notes, tiny translations, and color-coded underlines. She clicked on the desk lamp, turning the light down low so it wouldn't shine under the door, then opened her exercise notebook, its pages filled with tidy lines of foreign words and phrases. In the living room, the television blared. Leonard was glued to yet another football game, shouting at the screen like the players could hear him. Ariel knew that as long as the game was on, he wouldn't come looking for her. That had been her silent routine for 8 months straight. Whenever her husband worked late or got absorbed in his own hobbies, she slipped away with her books and notebooks. At first, it had just been a passing curiosity. An ad for free online foreign language lessons had popped up while she was browsing recipes. She clicked, thinking she'd watch for a minute or two. But it caught her. The strange shapes of the words, the rhythm of the sentences, the feeling of piecing together meaning from sounds she'd never grown up with, it all pulled her in. It reminded her of solving a complicated jigsaw puzzle where each new word snapped into place with a quiet thrill. She never breathed a word of it to Leonard, and she had no intention of doing so. 2 years earlier, she'd gotten excited about enrolling in a floral design course at the community college. She'd brought it up at dinner, her eyes shining, only to be met with his rough laughter that sliced through her enthusiasm. "Ariel, you know that's not a real thing, right?" he'd said, without even glancing up from his tablet. "You'll throw away money, go for a few weeks, and drop it, just like everything else." "I don't quit everything," she'd tried to protest. "I just want to try something new." "New?" he'd chuckled. "Every month you've got some fresh nonsense. Yoga, painting, candle making, whatever. How about you focus on this house instead?" Back then, she'd swallowed her words. The sting from his dismissal sank deep and stayed. And when 6 months later she dared to mention joining a beginner's yoga class, he hadn't let her finish the sentence. "We don't have the money for foolishness," he'd snapped. "You know how high the utility bills are? You think they pay themselves?" After that, Ariel simply stopped sharing her ideas and dreams with him at all. What was the point, she figured, if he was going to mock them anyway? Slowly, she felt herself fade inside her own home. Leonard decided where they vacationed, which furniture they bought, when people could come over, and how long they stayed. Ariel just cooked, cleaned, smiled, and tried now and then to voice an opinion. He brushed her off every time. "I got it, Ariel. You don't understand this stuff. Let me handle it." So Ariel backed away over and over until retreat became habit. She poured herself a cup of tea from the small thermos she kept hidden in the bedroom so she wouldn't need to walk past him in the kitchen. Settling onto the bed with her back against the headboard, she opened her notebook and dove into the next set of exercises. She mouthed the new words in a whisper, monitoring her pronunciation with an app on her phone while her headphones wrapped her in sound. There was a delicious thrill in having a secret, something completely her own, something Leonard neither controlled nor even suspected. In a life where almost every corner seemed claimed by someone else's decisions, this one tiny pocket of freedom was hers alone. About an hour later, the excited roar of a commentator drifted in from the living room. Someone must have scored. Ariel lifted her head, listening. Leonard's voice boomed a moment later, laughing and shouting responses, probably on a call with one of his buddies. He hadn't laughed like that with her in a long time. She drew in a quiet breath, let it out slowly, and forced her eyes back to the textbook, trying not to dwell on how much their life had changed. When they'd married 15 years ago, things had been completely different. Leonard had been attentive, always asking what she thought about everything, movies, plans, colors for the living room walls. They'd walked through parks at dusk holding hands, whispering dreams about the future, a better job for him, a cozy home filled with love, children who'd play on the living room rug. He had called her my star and swore she was the best blessing that had ever come into his life. Ariel had believed him. She was content just being near him, listening to him talk about his ambitions, a big house, and the kids they'd have someday. But as the years passed, something shifted. Leonard grew sharper, more self-assured in a way that left less and less room for her. Once he started making good money, it was like he'd quietly crowned himself the ruler of their shared life. Ariel worked as an accountant at a small local firm. Her paycheck was modest, barely covering groceries and a few personal expenses. Leonard never missed a chance to underline how much more he contributed. "If it weren't for me, where would you be?" Well, he would say whenever a disagreement sprang up. "Sharing some cramped room with 3 other ladies, that's where." Ariel would shut her mouth because a part of her believed him. Without him, could she manage? Was she really too indecisive, too fragile, too ordinary to build a life on her own? They had never had children. At first, that had been a mutual decision. Focus on careers, pay off the mortgage, fix up the place. Later, when they finally tried, nothing happened. Doctors ran tests, ordered exams, scheduled procedures. Each time the results came back normal. There was no clear reason, just a persistent emptiness. After more than a year, they stopped bringing it up. The topic hurt too much. Inside, Ariel still dreamed of a child. She pictured herself tucking a baby into bed, reading bedtime stories, guiding tiny hands across the floor as they learned to walk. But she held those dreams tightly behind her teeth, afraid that if she spoke them aloud, Leonard would throw them back at her. She could already hear him telling her it was her fault, that she couldn't even get this one thing right. In recent months, an invisible wall had risen between them. Leonard stayed at work later and later, coming home worn out and irritable. Over dinner, he answered in short grunts, his eyes glued to his phone. Ariel tried to keep the connection alive, asking about his day, sharing little stories from work, tossing in small jokes. He nodded mechanically, not really hearing her, and within minutes he'd slip away to the couch and the ever-present television. On weekends, he chose fishing trips with friends or long hours in the garage over time with her. Ariel kept trying to bridge the distance. She cooked his favorite meals, smothered pork chops with rich gravy, creamy mashed potatoes, and golden cornbread. She suggested they go out more, to a movie, a stroll in the park, even just a simple walk around the neighborhood. But his answers were always the same. "I'm tired, Ariel. Let me rest. You don't get how hard it is grinding all week and then having to play event planner for you too." And so she retreated again. She washed dishes in the quiet kitchen, scrubbed the bathroom, dusted the shelves, and sometimes stood at the window watching strangers pass by on the sidewalk, wondering when their marriage had slipped off the tracks. At what precise moment had they become strangers under the same roof? She felt him slipping away from her, or maybe already lost, and yet she couldn't bear to admit it. She didn't want to believe that 15 years were wasted, that their love was gone, that she was essentially alone. So when Leonard suddenly suggested they start looking for a larger place, her heart leaped. Their one bedroom in an aging building on the edge of town had long felt cramped. Maybe this was their opening. A new home, a shared goal, a fresh project. Maybe it could pull them back toward one another. A newer condo, a different layout, a new season of life. Maybe it would turn things around. They began browsing listings on real estate websites. Well, Leonard browsed. Ariel sat beside him on the sofa, leaning in to see the screen whenever he tipped the tablet in her direction. He ran through the options, and she timidly offered thoughts on each one, the size of the kitchen, the way the light came through the windows, whether the floor plan seemed practical. Most of the time, he dismissed her input with a wave. "Too far from the train," he'd say. "That one's overpriced. This area? Nothing but trouble around there. Do you even understand how this works?" Eventually, Ariel stopped pushing. She simply sat quietly watching the images scroll by, her own unheard opinions drifting through her mind. Weeks of searching bled into one another until more than a month had passed. On weekends, they drove around to open houses. At first, those outings had a spark of excitement, but after countless disappointments, they became a chore. The layout was strange, the neighbors seemed loud, the buildings were decades old. There was no parking, or the price was too high. Leonard found something wrong with every unit, constantly nitpicking and arguing with agents. Ariel grew weary of the endless wandering, his irritable tone, and the sense that all of it was pointless. Some days she wondered if he was dragging his feet on purpose, subconsciously finding flaws to delay committing to anything at all. If so, why? She had no answer. Then one evening, as she sat at her desk working through another tricky grammar exercise, the bedroom door suddenly flew open. Leonard didn't bother to knock. The door banged against the wall and Ariel jumped, snapping her notebook shut and shoving it beneath her pillow in one swift motion. Her heart pounded in her chest. If he noticed the books, the headphones, all of it, what would he say? "Ariel, look at this," he said, shoving his phone toward at her, his attention completely on the screen. "This is the one." He dropped down on the edge of the bed and flashed the listing. 3 bedrooms, about a 200 square feet. Good neighborhood. Price is solid. Some German guy is selling. We're viewing it tomorrow. Ariel exhaled quietly. It seemed he hadn't noticed anything out of place. She took the phone from him and scanned the description. The condo looked gorgeous. Bright rooms with high ceilings, a generous kitchen, 2 bathrooms, and a glass-enclosed balcony that looked out toward the city skyline. The photos were crisp and professionally done. You could tell the owner had cared for the place. The hardwood floors gleamed, the walls looked freshly painted, and the furniture seemed sturdy and well-chosen. "It's beautiful," she said softly, still flipping through the photos. "Why is he selling?" "It says here he's heading back to his home country," Leonard replied, already pulling the phone back as if she'd held it a second too long. "He's been here a few years for work, contract's up, time to go. I've already messaged him. We're meeting at 11 in the morning." "You want me to come along?" Ariel asked. "Of course," Leonard said. "Good. I'm tired of wasting weekends on this. Hopefully this is it." He stretched, yawning. "I'm going to finish the game. What are you doing in here anyway?" "Just reading a little before bed," she answered. "Uh-huh." He nodded absently, already halfway out the door. "Don't stay up too late. We gotta be up early." He closed the door and Ariel sat there, staring straight ahead for a moment. A German seller. A foreigner. Something flickered to life inside her. She pulled the notebook from under the pillow, turning to the last page where she'd been writing down new vocabulary. Her German was no longer at beginner level. She could read simple texts, follow along with movies if they spoke clearly and not too fast, and she'd even started writing short notes as practice. Her online teacher frequently praised her for her progress, saying she had a natural ear for the language and good pronunciation. What if... The thought rose out of nowhere, half wild, half exciting. What if she didn't mention that she understood German? What if, during the meeting, she played the part of the quiet wife who didn't know a word? Leonard loved to boast that his business trips to Europe had sharpened his German. He'd gone to Berlin and Munich on several occasions, meeting partners, negotiating contracts, and bragging about how well he handled himself abroad. If he slipped into German with the seller, confident that she was out of the loop, Ariel could hear everything, not the edited versions Leonard chose to share later, not his spin on the details, just the raw conversation. Why did she feel such a strong pull to do that? She couldn't fully explain it even to herself. There was an uneasiness humming in her chest, a quiet intuition. Maybe she needed to know if Leonard was being completely honest with her. Maybe she was simply exhausted from standing on the sidelines of every major decision. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted one chance to use the skill she'd been hiding, to prove to herself that she wasn't as powerless or naive as he assumed. She turned off the lamp and lay down beside him, but sleep wouldn't come. Leonard snored heavily, sprawled across 3/4 of the mattress. Ariel clung to the narrow strip of space left to her, careful not to jostle him. If he didn't sleep well, his temper was always worse the next day. She stared into the dark, her mind spinning around and around tomorrow's meeting. A strange mix of excitement and dread churned in her stomach. What if she didn't understand when they spoke quickly? What if she slipped and reacted to something, giving herself away? What if she learned something that would blow her life apart? Could she unknow it? Could she go back to pretending everything was fine? But then another thought cut through the haze. My life already feels unbearable. What could be worse than waking up every day feeling unseen, unwanted, and useless? In the morning, they left early. The condo was across town in a new, upscale development. As they drove, Leonard kept his eyes on the road, muttering under his breath about other drivers, honking lightly at anyone he thought was going too slow or changing lanes too abruptly. Ariel watched the city pass by her window, rehearsing possible conversations in her head. Her palms grew damp. What if her mind went blank the moment she heard German spoken live? What if the sounds blurred together and she caught only fragments? What if this whole scheme was foolish and she was just torturing herself for nothing? "Why are you looking like that?" Leonard suddenly asked as they waited at a red light, glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. "You already got a problem with the condo you haven't seen?" "No," Ariel said quickly. "I do like it. I'm just worried something might go wrong. Again." "Quit stressing," he said. "This one is solid. I checked the condo's history, the paperwork, everything's legit. Don't worry. And if anything comes up, I'll translate. With foreigners, you gotta be careful. They'll try to pull one over on you if you let them. These Europeans can be slick. They figure we're easy targets." Ariel folded her hands together in her lap. "You'll translate," she thought bitterly. "The real question is what you'll tell me and what you'll leave out." They parked in front of a sleek high-rise with a glass facade that reflected the bright morning sky. Inside, the lobby gleamed with a polished front desk, a uniformed concierge, an intercom system, and discreet surveillance cameras mounted in the corners. Each landing had leather sofas arranged in small sitting areas, with tasteful artwork on the walls. A faint, expensive fragrance drifted in the air. Leonard surveyed the space with a satisfied nod. Not bad. This neighborhood's blowing up. Prices going nowhere but up. Good investment. Ariel kept her thoughts to herself. They stepped into the elevator. It moved quietly and smoothly, its walls mirrored top to bottom. Ariel caught sight of her own reflection, medium brown skin, deep-set dark eyes framed by fine lines, full lips pressed tight, silver coils of natural hair twisted neatly back from her round face. Her expression was drawn and tense, hands gripping her purse strap. "You look scared," she told herself. "Breathe. Act normal. Just be quiet and listen. Slip into the role you always play, the gentle, invisible woman who never gives anyone trouble." The elevator chimed and the doors glided open on the 12th floor. They walked down a corridor carpeted in soft, muffling fibers. Leonard checked the number on his phone, then stopped before a sleek door. Ariel could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. This was it. Time to perform. Could she pull it off? Could she remain still and neutral no matter what she heard? Or would her face betray her? Leonard pressed the doorbell. Footsteps approached from inside, measured, confident. Ariel drew in a long breath, trying to steady herself. "It's fine," she told herself. "You're just going to listen, that's all. Learning the truth is not a sin." The lock clicked and the door opened. A man of about 50 stood on the threshold, tall and lean, with steel gray hair and calm gray eyes behind thin framed glasses. He wore a light-colored shirt and dark trousers, everything about him tidy and understated. He smiled and extended his hand toward Leonard. "Rainer Vogel," he introduced himself with a gentle accent, then shifted easily into German, realizing Leonard understood. Ariel felt every muscle in her body tighten, though she kept her expression even. She caught every word of the greeting, the welcome, and his quick apology for the slight mess, even though the hallway behind him looked immaculate. Leonard answered in German as well, speaking briskly, confidently, giving his own name and then gesturing vaguely toward her. "This is my wife, Ariel. She doesn't speak your language, so I'll translate for her," he said. Rainer turned to her with a warm smile and extended his hand. Ariel took it, smiled shyly, and lowered her gaze, playing the part of the slightly overwhelmed spouse. Inside, her nerves crackled with electricity. "Please, come in," Rainer said, stepping aside and holding the door wider. They entered a wide hallway with light wooden floors and a built-in closet stretching across one wall. A large mirror in a carved frame reflected them back. Subtle ceiling lights bathed the space in a gentle glow. Ariel caught the faint aroma of coffee and something like citrus. Rainer led them into the living room, and Ariel's breath hitched quietly. The room was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over a park and a ribbon of water shimmering in the distance. The furnishings were modern but inviting, a generous gray sectional, a glass and wood coffee table, bookshelves lined with novels and travel souvenirs. "It's beautiful," she murmured in English before she could stop herself. Leonard translated, then casually added his own spin. "My wife's impressed, but we'll see if the price matches," he said in German, his tone half joking, half testing. Ariel caught the shift in his words, the subtle undermining, and tucked the detail away. Rainer chuckled, nodded, and began leading them through the rest of the condo. They toured the master bedroom with its wide bed and walk-in closet, a second smaller room currently set up as an office, and a bright studio-style kitchen fitted with sleek modern appliances and marble countertops. As they walked, Rainer spoke about the building, the neighborhood, the management company. Leonard translated bits and pieces for Ariel, but she noticed he trimmed things down or twisted them. When Rainer praised the building's management, saying that any issue was handled quickly and professionally, Leonard told her in English, "He says the management's okay, nothing special, but manageable." When Rainer mentioned that the neighbors were mostly professionals, professors, doctors, and small business owners, Leonard shrugged. "Just regular folks around here. No problem so far," he relayed. Ariel pretended to be absorbed by the finishes and the view, but confusion slowly coiled in her chest. Why was Leonard understating the positives? Why soften the building's strengths? Was he angling for a better price by acting unimpressed? Maybe. That was the simplest explanation. Back in the living room, Rainer offered them coffee. Leonard agreed at once. Ariel perched on the edge of the sofa, hands folded, as Rainer went to the kitchen. She listened to the soft hiss of the coffee machine and the gentle clink of cups. Leonard wandered around, examining the books and framed photographs. "So what do you think?" he asked her in English, still facing the shelves. "I love it," Ariel replied honestly. "It feels like home already." "Yeah, it's not bad," he said, stroking his chin. "But the price? Way too high. We'll have to push him." Ariel wanted to say more, to argue that a good place was worth paying fairly for, but she stayed silent. Rainer returned with a tray holding 3 cups and a plate of cookies, setting it on the table with practiced ease. Ariel thanked him with a small nod and lifted her cup. The smell of strong, freshly ground coffee rose to meet her. Rainer began speaking again, the lightness in his voice replaced with a note of wistfulness. Ariel focused on his words. He explained that he had lived in the condo for 3 years, that he had grown attached to it, and that the decision to leave wasn't easy. His contract with a local company had ended. His wife and grown children were back in Germany and missed him, and he missed them. He spoke with a quiet fondness about them, about late-night video calls, about holidays spent apart. Leonard translated only part of it. "He's leaving because his work contract's finished," he said briskly. "That's all." Ariel frowned inwardly. Why cut out the details about the family, the feeling behind the words? Those small things mattered. They painted Rainer as a human being, not just a seller. But apparently Leonard didn't think she needed that context. Soon the conversation shifted to the price. Rainer named his figure. It was high, but perfectly in line with what Ariel had seen online for condos in the area. Leonard's face darkened. "Too much," he said to her briefly in English, before launching into a full-scale negotiation in German. Ariel followed as best she could. Leonard brought up the unstable real estate market, the risk of prices dropping, claimed they were already considering cheaper options. Rainer listened calmly and answered with quiet confidence. The apartment was in excellent condition, the area desirable, the documents in perfect order. They could move in right after the closing. Leonard stayed firm, countering with a price 20% lower than the asking price. Rainer refused. The discount Leonard wanted was unreasonable. Ariel sat there, cradling her cup, feeling utterly peripheral. They were discussing her future home, the place she would cook in, sleep in, decorate, and yet she might as well have been a painting on the wall. After about 20 minutes of back and forth, they reached a compromise, a price modestly below the original, but still fair to both sides. The men shook hands, both looking satisfied with themselves. "Done," Leonard told Ariel with a triumphant grin. "Got us a great deal. You see how you have to talk to people like that? Once they realize you're not a fool, they fold." Ariel offered a small, strained smile. Rainer said something else then, and Ariel instinctively leaned in, tuning her ear. He suggested they discuss the next steps, when to close, what paperwork was needed, how to structure the agreement properly. Leonard nodded, agreeing that they needed to sort out the details. "You understand," Rainer went on in German, directing his words to Leonard. "With transactions like this, it's often simpler to keep the documentation streamlined. Less bureaucracy, fewer tax complications on my side. I can recommend a notary. He's fast and thorough." Leonard's interest sharpened. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "Well," Rainer said, as if he were recommending a restaurant, "you could put the condo under one person's name. It makes everything more straightforward with the bank and the forms. You can distribute ownership within the family later if you like. It's what I did with my own properties. First, everything in my name, and later I divided it quietly. Simple and beneficial." Ariel felt the blood drain from her face. One name, one owner. Leonard, not her. Leonard went quiet, clearly considering it. Then he nodded slowly. "That does sound reasonable. Why make it complicated?" "Of course. It's your decision," Rainer replied. "I'm only sharing what worked for me. You have time to think it over. I can send you the notary's contact. He'll explain everything in more detail." "Yes, send that," Leonard said. Ariel remained perfectly still, though a storm had erupted inside her. Leonard hadn't translated a word of this. To her, he had continued chatting casually, as if nothing significant was happening. Out loud, he kept talking about paint colors and which pieces of furniture might be left behind, as if the question of whose name would be on the deed was trivial. She looked at her husband, at the relaxed way he lounged on the sofa, one arm thrown over the back, his voice smooth and assured. He looked content, even proud of himself, while she sat a few inches away, feeling as though the floor had opened beneath her. Did he truly intend to put the condo solely in his name? Did he plan to tuck that decision away, to never mention that the papers excluded her? Would he later shrug and say, "We'll fix it at some point," then simply never do it, leaving her with nothing, dependent on his whims in every way? Her thoughts spiraled. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe he really did intend to add her later. Maybe this was just a temporary choice for convenience. But if that were so, why hide it? Why not discuss it even briefly? Why carry on as if the conversation had never happened? She bit down on the inside of her cheek to keep her eyes from filling with tears. Not here. Not now. She had to hold herself together. She had to sit through this meeting until the end. After that, she had no idea what would come next. The conversation stretched on for another 40 minutes. They talked about scheduling an independent appraisal, verifying the documents, setting move-out and move-in dates. Reiner stayed polite and professional. Leonard maintained his confident stance. Ariel finished the last of her now lukewarm coffee without really tasting it. With each passing minute, the hollow feeling inside her widened. Eventually, Reiner pulled out a laptop and opened a draft of a preliminary agreement. Leonard moved closer, leaning over the screen. They spoke about clauses and timelines, negotiating minor points. Ariel watched them, two men shaping the framework of her future while she sat unused, like an extra chair. At one point, Reiner paused and glanced up at her. His eyes rested on her for a long moment, studying her face. Ariel dropped her gaze, but she could feel his attention still on her. Then he turned back to Leonard and spoke quietly, clearly enough that she had no trouble understanding. "Your wife doesn't know the condo will be registered only in your name, does she, he asked. "Have I understood that correctly?" Time seemed to freeze. Ariel stared at a spot on the carpet, unable to move or breathe. Her heart pounded so loudly that she could barely hear what followed. Leonard didn't flinch. He didn't appear embarrassed or conflicted. He simply gave a short laugh and shook his head. "What difference does it make?" he replied in German, his tone light, almost bored. "She doesn't understand anyway, and honestly, it's not her concern. I make the money, I pay, I decide. She just lives and enjoys what I provide. Everything's fine." Reiner nodded, though something like doubt or discomfort flickered across his features. He said nothing more about it and turned his attention back to the laptop. Ariel sat perfectly still, but inside everything was burning. Shock, pain, fury, and despair tangled together in one thick knot lodged in her throat. She couldn't swallow it down. She doesn't understand. It's none of her business. She just lives and enjoys. So that was how he saw her. Not as a partner, not as an equal, not even as a full person with needs and rights. Just a dependent creature he fed and housed. A pet that should be grateful and silent. 15 years of marriage. 15 years of cooking his meals, washing his clothes, cleaning their home, listening to his troubles, enduring his silences and belittling comments. 15 years of believing, hoping, waiting for a return to closeness. And now this. He hadn't even considered her worthy of knowing that the condo, the home they were supposed to share, would be legally his alone. She clenched her jaw until it ached, forcing herself not to react. She stayed in character, the quiet, agreeable wife he was so used to seeing. Because in that moment she realized something important he was utterly sure she was ignorant. He had no idea that every word he uttered in German was sliding cleanly into her understanding. The meeting wound down. Leonard and Reiner exchanged phone numbers again and agreed to speak in a couple of days once they'd confirmed times with the notary. Reiner walked them to the door, shook Leonard's hand firmly, and offered Ariel a polite nod and a gentle smile. They rode down in the elevator in silence. Leonard hummed a little tune under his breath, clearly pleased with himself. As they stepped out onto the street, the cool air hit Ariel's face. She lifted her eyes toward the bright sky, her mind churning with everything she had just heard, and everything Leonard still believed she didn't know. The sun was bright and sharp, the kind of spring light that made everything look cleaner than it really was. People strolled along the paths, kids shouted on the playground, a dog barked somewhere nearby. Just another ordinary day, ordinary lives moving forward. Ariel walked beside Leonard toward the car, feeling like she'd slipped sideways into some parallel world. The neighborhood, the sky, the sound of children laughing, it all looked normal. But inside her, a storm was tearing through everything she thought she knew. They got into the car. Leonard started the engine and turned on some upbeat pop track, drumming his fingers against the steering wheel. "Well, Ariel, nice spot, huh?" he said, as he pulled away from the curb. "Told you we'd land on something decent eventually. This German guy turned out to be reasonable, not like those tightwads we dealt with before. Dropped the price easy. I did good, didn't I?" Ariel kept her eyes on the window, watching trees and storefronts slide by in a blur. Her insides were boiling, but when she spoke, her voice came out steady and almost flat. "Yes, it's a nice condo." "See?" Leonard bounced his fingers in time with the music. We'll sign the preliminary contract next week, put down the deposit, and that's it. Done deal. Month and a half, 2 tops, we'll be moving in. You can start dreaming up paint colors and remodeling if you want, though honestly, place already looks close to perfect. Was all Ariel managed. Leonard didn't notice a thing. He just kept talking, riding his own wave of satisfaction, about how lucky they were that everything had lined up, how glad he was this whole apartment hunt was finally wrapping up. Ariel heard only bits and pieces. The rest of her mind was stuck on the words she'd heard in Rayner's living room. The paperwork can all go in your name. She doesn't understand. It's none of her concern. Each phrase cut through her like a blade. For years she had told herself they were a team, that they were building a life together, that despite his flaws, Leonard cared. Now it was clear he'd reduced her to something like a live-in maid who made no demands, had no opinion, and certainly didn't need a stake in anything. Nausea rose in her throat. She closed her eyes for a second and focused on breathing. You can't break down now, she told herself. Not here, not yet. You need a clear head. You need a plan. When they got home, Leonard dropped onto the couch and grabbed the remote in one fluid motion, like that spot had a magnet just for him. The TV flicked on. Ariel went straight to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water and tossed it back in the one swallow, but her hands were shaking so badly the rim clinked against her teeth. She set the glass in the sink and braced her palms against the countertop, staring out at the washed-out gray of their building's courtyard. What now? If she confronted him outright, asked why he was planning to lock her out of the condo paperwork, he'd find a smooth explanation. He always did. He'd say it was about taxes, that it was easier for the bank that way. That, of course, he'd add her name later. He'd shake his head, tell her she didn't get how these things worked and to stop worrying. And because she had wanted so badly to believe, she would probably have swallowed it. Until yesterday. Now she'd heard his real voice, the one he used when he thought she was deaf. She'd heard the tone, the contempt, the certainty that she was too ignorant to matter. He had not even bothered to lower his voice when he said it. Why would he? In his mind, she was blind and deaf in that world. Ariel straightened. No. Enough. Enough being easy. Enough fading into the background. Enough pretending not to see what was right in front of her because the truth hurt. She walked back into the living room. Leonard was laughing at something on a talk show, relaxed, one arm thrown over the back of the sofa. Ariel stopped in the doorway and just stared at him for a moment. This man had made plans to sign for a home in his name alone, knowing she believed it was theirs. He was prepared to leave her with nothing but his provision, and he was sure she'd never find out. Leonard, she said. He didn't take his eyes off the screen. We need to talk. Later, Ariel. Can't you see I'm watching something? Before, that would have been enough to make her retreat. She would have murmured an apology, walked back to the kitchen, told herself she'd bring it up another day, and then never would. But not this time. No, she said, and there was a strength in her voice she didn't quite recognize. Leonard finally looked away from the TV, surprised. What's got you so riled up? Something happen? Something did happen, Ariel said, stepping into the room. Tell me, whose name are you planning to put on the deed? He blinked, clearly not expecting that. Both of ours, obviously. Why are you lying? His whole expression hardened. What are you talking about? Ariel met his eyes. Her heart hammered so hard she felt it in her throat, but she held his gaze. It was terrifying to stand her ground like this, but she knew there was no going back. Rayner suggested you put the place in one person's name, yours, and you agreed. Leonard's face twitched, his eyes narrowed. How do you... He stumbled over the words. Were you eavesdropping? I heard your conversation. But you don't understand, Chifo. He cut himself off mid-sentence, and Ariel saw the realization flicker across his face. Don't understand? She said with a bitter little laugh. You sure about that? The air went still. Leonard stared at her like he was seeing someone completely new. Then he slowly pushed himself up from the sofa. You know German? He asked, disbelief and confusion tangled in his voice. Ariel didn't answer. She simply stood there, waiting. Leonard dragged a hand over his face. Then he stepped toward her, his voice suddenly sharp. How long, he demanded. How long have you understood it? What difference does that make? Ariel took an involuntary step back. The point is, you plan to cut me out. What scheme? His voice rose and she flinched but stayed put. I was trying to simplify everything. Less hassle, then I'd add your name. It would have been fine. Or maybe you wouldn't have added me, she said quietly. Maybe it would stay just like that, only you on the papers. Convenient, isn't it? I'd be completely dependent on you, no way out. What are you even talking about? Leonard threw his hands up. I've been grinding for us for 15 years, paying the bills, taking care of everything, and now I'm some kind of villain? Grinding for us? Ariel's voice shook, but she didn't retreat. And what have I been doing all these years lying on the couch? I never said that. I worked too. I kept this home together. I put up with you ignoring me. What ignoring? He snapped, stepping toward her. I've always treated you fine. You had a roof, clothes, vacations. I've looked after you. Something inside Ariel snapped. You didn't even think you needed my opinion about the condo, she shot back. You just went ahead, made the deal, and expected me to smile and nod. Because I actually understand this stuff, Hea, he barked. You don't know a thing about property, Ariel. And you don't know a thing about how to treat a wife, she fired back before she could stop herself. Leonard froze. His face went a deep red, veins standing out at his temples. She could see he was barely holding himself together, stunned and furious, and beneath it all, unnerved. Listen, he said at last, his voice slow and measured, like he was talking to a child. You overheard one conversation and twisted it up in your head. I'm telling you for the last time, I was trying to make things easier. That's how these deals are often done. Then we'd add you, no problem. But since you clearly don't trust me, I don't trust you because I heard what you told Raynor, Ariel cut in. You said, she doesn't understand anyway. It's none of her business. She just lives and enjoys what I provide. Silence dropped so hard they could hear faint music from a neighbor's apartment. Leonard stood there, his mouth slightly open, for once without a quick retort. I didn't mean it like that, he muttered finally. Then how did you mean it? Ariel stepped closer now, and it was him backing up. Explain what you meant when you described me like I'm some stupid thing who doesn't need to know anything. When you and a stranger discussed my life like I was an object. Ariel, I got carried away, he said, trying to soften his tone. Things slip out. You know I wasn't trying to hurt you. You've been hurting me for years, she said. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Every dismissive word, every look, every time you decided things over my head, I kept hoping it would pass, that you were just stressed, that you'd come back to who you were. But now I see you just don't respect me. You probably never did. That's not true, he snapped. I do respect you. Then why didn't you think I deserved to hear that the condo would be in your name only? Her voice rose with each word, something fierce and long-buried pushing its way out. Why hide it from me? Why talk it through with a man you barely know but not with your wife? Leonard paced back and forth like a caged animal. Then he abruptly stopped and turned on her. And where did this language thing even come from? He demanded, his tone edged with accusation now. Why didn't you tell me? Sneaking around, learning in secret? What else are you hiding? Ariel stared at him, stunned at how fast he'd flipped the script. I didn't sneak anything, she said, her voice dropping. I just didn't tell you because I knew exactly what you'd do, like with the floral course, the yoga classes. Every single time something lit me up, you laughed it out of me. Don't exaggerate, he scoffed. I just told you the truth. You start things and never finish them. I stopped because you crush my desire, Ariel suddenly shouted, startling herself with the volume. She hardly ever raised her voice. Every time I try something new, you call it stupid or childish or a waste of money. You have spent years convincing me I'm not capable of anything real. And I believed you. I believed I was weak and foolish and lucky to even have you. I never said that. His tone was less certain now. Maybe not in those exact words, she said, hugging her arms around herself as if she were cold. But that's the message I got. And you know what's worst? I started to think you were right. Leonard looked down at the floor. Ariel waited, hoping he'd deny it, apologize, say something that would make the last 15 years feel less wasted, but he stayed quiet. Say something, she said at last, exhausted. He lifted his head. There was something different in his eyes now, less fury, more disorientation. What do you want me to say? He asked flatly. That I've been a bad husband? That I've hurt you? He exhaled. Fine. Maybe I did. But I still did my part. I worked like crazy so we'd always be okay. So you wouldn't have to worry. Respect isn't about money, Ariel said, shaking her head. Respect is asking my opinion, considering what I want, not describing me like a clueless freeloader to some stranger. How long are we going to drag this out? Leonard suddenly exploded. I told you it just slipped. Raynor asked. I answered. I wasn't thinking. Exactly, Ariel said bitterly. When people aren't thinking, they say what they really believe. And you showed me exactly how you see me. Leonard's hands curled into fists. For a heartbeat, she was afraid he might actually hit her. Instead, he turned his back and stalked to the window, staring out at the street. You're blowing this out of proportion, he said. I'm a good husband. I don't drink, I don't cheat, I pay the bills. Plenty of women would be thrilled to have what you have. Plenty of women in my place would have left you a long time ago, Ariel said quietly. He spun around, something dangerous flared in his eyes. What did you just say? I said plenty of women would have walked away, she repeated more firmly, because living with someone who doesn't respect you, who thinks you're a burden, is unbearable. So now you're threatening divorce? Leonard stepped toward her, his face twisted with anger. Seriously? Over one overheard conversation? Not over one conversation, Ariel said, shaking her head. Over 15 years where I was invisible in my own home. Over the fact that you plan to leave me out of a major purchase entirely. Over the fact that even now you don't see what you did wrong. I wasn't trying to take anything from you, he shouted. I was trying to simplify things. You were trying to trick me, Ariel shouted back, her voice cracking. Because you assumed I was too stupid to understand, too quiet to question you, too grateful to ever stand up for myself. That's why you felt so comfortable saying I just live and enjoy what you provide. They stood there facing each other, both breathing hard, both pushed past a line they could no longer pretend wasn't there. Outside, a horn honked. Kids yelled in the courtyard. Life went on. Theirs was splintering. I don't even know what's happening, Leonard muttered finally, sounding genuinely thrown. We were fine, everything was fine. Where's all this coming from? It was fine for you, Ariel said softly. For me? It hasn't been fine for a long time. I just didn't say anything. I hoped. I waited. I wanted you to look at me the way you used to. Tears spilled over then, and she let them. I hoped you still loved me, but you stopped a long time ago. I just didn't want to see it. Leonard stood in silence. Slowly, she watched his face change. The fury drained out, leaving behind something worn out and hollow. Maybe, he said at last, and the word landed like a verdict. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I'm tired, Ariel. Tired of work, of the stress, of all of it. And you, he hesitated, you've just been there, in the background, comfortable, familiar. I didn't think you were unhappy. I thought you were fine with things as they were. I wasn't, she whispered. But you didn't ask. He nodded once, walked back over to the couch, and sat down heavily, rubbing his face with both hands. Ariel stood in the middle of the room, feeling drained and strangely clear at the same time. What now? Leonard asked without looking up. I don't know, Ariel answered honestly. But we're not buying that condo. Not from Raynor. Not the way you planned. He lifted his head. So the deal's off? Yes, she said, without hesitation. I won't agree to any place that's only in your name, and I need time to think. About us. About whether there's anything left to salvage. So you want a divorce, he said, not even making it a question. I don't know yet, she replied. I just know I can't keep living like this. And then what? The mocking edge slipped back into his tone. You gonna move out on that little paycheck of yours? Rent some room in a rundown place and play independent? Maybe, Ariel said calmly, but it'll be my place, my life, my choice. He opened his mouth like he had more to say, then snapped it shut. After a moment, he shrugged, stood up, and said, Do what you want. I'm going to Kareem's. I'll stay there a while, figure things out. You do the same. Maybe you'll come back to your senses. He went to the bedroom. Ariel heard drawers yanking open, clothes being thrown into a bag. A few minutes later, he walked out with 2 duffel bags, eyes fixed anywhere but on her. If you need anything for paperwork or whatever, call me, he said flatly. Then he left, the door closing with a dull thud. Silence pressed in from every side. Ariel moved to the window and watched him emerge from the building, get into the car, and drive away. Only when he turned the corner and disappeared did her knees buckle. She slid down the wall to the floor and broke. She cried for a long time, for the hurt, for the relief, for the years she couldn't get back, for the fear of an unknown future, for the marriage she had tried so hard to save. The tears just kept coming. Eventually the sobs faded. Her breathing steadied. Ariel swiped at her face with her sleeve, stood up, and went to the bedroom. The closet doors hung open, hangers twisted and askew. She straightened them mechanically, folded the linen that had fallen, put things back where they belonged. Then she reached into her hiding spot, pulled out her notebook and textbook, and sat on the bed. Tomorrow she would call Rainer. She would tell him the truth. They were backing out of the deal. She would apologize for wasting his time. After that, she didn't know, but for the first time in years, she felt something fierce and quiet inside her. This life is mine. She opened to a blank page, picked up her pen, and wrote a few lines in German, the language she had learned in secret. The sentences came easily, as if they'd been waiting. Ich bin stärker, als ich dachte. Ich schaffe das. Ich werde erfolgreich sein. I'm stronger than I thought. I can handle this. I will succeed. Outside, the sun tipped toward the horizon, smearing the sky with pinks and oranges. Ariel watched the colors deepen and thought, tomorrow is a new day. The first day of a different life. The next morning she woke before her alarm, despite having slept in fits and starts. Her head ached, her body felt heavy, but when she looked in the mirror, she saw something new in her own gaze, a steady, determined focus. She brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table with her phone, and pulled up Rainer's number. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the call icon. 1 ring, 2, 3. Yes, hello? Came his familiar voice with that gentle accent. Ariel took a breath and answered in German, speaking slowly, searching for the clearest words. Rainer, this is Ariel. My husband and I came to see your apartment yesterday. There was a pause. When he spoke again, she heard genuine surprise. Ariel, you speak German? Yes, she said, feeling some of the tension to ease from her shoulders. I'm sorry I didn't say so yesterday. The circumstances were complicated. I understand, he said softly. There was another pause. So you heard our conversation? Every word, she replied. Silence stretched out. I'm very sorry, he said at last, and she could hear the sincerity. I shouldn't have agreed to that kind of arrangement. Your husband was so insistent, and I told myself it was a family matter, but I felt uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. You're not to blame, Ariel said, looking at the dull sky outside her window. I'm calling to let you know we won't be buying the condo. Wait, Rainer said quickly. But you personally, you liked it, yes? And it really is a good place. Do you want to buy it yourself? Ariel blinked. What do you mean? Well, he said, you clearly liked the apartment. If you want to buy it without your husband, we could try to make that possible. I don't have that kind of money, she admitted. I'm an accountant, my salary isn't big. I can't just pay for an apartment like that. And a mortgage, Fischita asked. A loan? I don't know, she said, rubbing the bridge of her nose. I've never handled anything like that. Leonard always decided. Listen, Rainer said gently. I understand things must be difficult right now, but if you truly want your own place, maybe we can find a way. I can lower the price a bit. I can wait while you arrange a loan. I'm not in such a hurry that I must sell tomorrow. A spark of something warm stirred in Ariel's chest. Why would you help me? She asked quietly. Because when I looked at you yesterday, he said, I thought of my daughter. She was in a similar situation a few years back. Her husband kept everything from her, made decisions alone. She left him, started over. Now she's happy. When I saw your face, I thought, maybe I can help another woman a little too. Tears pricked at her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. I'll think about it. I need some time to sort things out. Of course, he said. Take the time you need. Call me when you're ready. And if you need help with documents or advice, tell me. I know a good lawyer who specializes in these matters. They said goodbye. Ariel set her phone down and covered her face with her hands. Buy the condo herself, on her own. Without Leonard. The idea was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. Her own place, her own name on the deed, her own life. The next few days passed like she was walking through fog. Leonard came back 3 days later, withdrawn and quiet. They barely spoke. He slept on the couch, left before she woke, came back late. Ariel didn't push. She needed the silence to think. She spent evenings researching mortgages, reading up on divorce laws, and learning how marital property worked. She browsed forums, sent anonymous questions to legal advice sites, scribbled calculations on scrap paper. The numbers weren't exactly comforting, but they also weren't impossible. If they divorced, she could claim half of the condo they currently owned. If Leonard bought out her share or they sold it on the market, her portion would be enough for a down payment. With her steady job and work history, a bank might approve a mortgage for the rest. A week later, she called Rayner again. "I want to try," she said, skipping any polite lead-in, "to buy the apartment, but I'll need your patience and your help." "I have both," he replied, and she could hear a smile in his voice. "Let's meet and talk everything through." They met at a small cafe near his building. He arrived with a folder of documents and the contact information for a lawyer. Over steaming cups of coffee, they went through it all: price, timing, loan process, legal steps. True to his word, Rayner lowered the price by 10%. "I want to help," he explained. "Getting the last possible euro is not as important as knowing this place goes to someone who needs it. But first," he added carefully, "you must sort things out with your husband. While you are still legally married, the law will treat big purchases as joint matters." "I know," Ariel said, fingers wrapped tight around her cup. "I'm filing for divorce this week." Saying the words out loud felt like jumping off a cliff. It was terrifying and freeing. That same day, she met with the lawyer Rayner had recommended, a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and a calm, measured voice. Ariel told her everything. "You need to file for divorce and at the same time demand division of property," the lawyer said after listening carefully. "Without a prenup, the court will usually split marital assets equally. Your husband may argue he contributed more financially, but that doesn't change much legally in most cases." "How long will it take?" Ariel asked. 3 to 4 months if it goes smoothly," the lawyer replied. "Longer if he fights it." Ariel wrote it all down in her notebook, underlining the key points. "One more question," the lawyer said, studying her. "Are you sure about this? Divorce isn't easy. Not emotionally, not financially. Are you ready?" Ariel lifted her head and met the woman's gaze. "Yes," she said, "more than ready." She put off talking to Leonard until that evening. Out of habit, she cooked dinner. He came in around 7:30, sat down at the table without much of a greeting. They ate in silence. The air between them felt thick and heavy. Finally, Ariel set her fork down. "Leonard, we need to talk," she said. He looked up, and for the first time in days, she saw something like resignation in his eyes, like he already knew what was coming. "I'm filing for divorce," she said. "Tomorrow I'm bringing the papers to the lawyer. I want you to know." He slowly lowered his fork and leaned back in his chair. "So you decided," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "And nothing I say will change your mind?" "No?" He nodded, rubbing his face with both hands. "Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe we really are done. I've been thinking about it all week. We've been strangers for a long time, Ariel. I just didn't want to face it." "I didn't either," she said quietly. "But we can't pretend anymore." "So we split the condo?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "I want my half." "Fine," he said after a moment. "But let's not sell it. I'll buy your share. We'll get an independent appraisal. I'll pay the market value." Ariel nodded. It was fair, and more than she'd expected from him, honestly. "Agreed," she said. They sat there a little longer, both lost in separate thoughts. Then Leonard stood, went to the bedroom, and began packing. Ariel stayed in the kitchen, listening to drawers slide open, zippers pull closed. Half an hour later, he came out with 2 bags. "I'll stay with Kareem for now," he said from the doorway. "Then I'll find my own place. Call me if you need anything for the paperwork." "Okay," she replied. He lingered as if wanting to add something, then just nodded and left. The door shut softly behind him. No slammed door, no final shout, just a quiet ending. The silence that followed felt different this time, not suffocating, but strangely peaceful. The months that followed were grueling. Forms, court dates, appraisals, numbers. But Leonard kept his word. He didn't fight the division of property, didn't try to drag things out. 4 months later, their marriage was legally over and the condo officially half hers, half his. He bought out her share at the appraised value. When the money hit her account, the number looked huge and at the same time, like a limited resource she had to use wisely. During that period, Ariel had done more than just navigate lawyers and courts. She'd started looking for a new job, specifically one where her language skills would matter. She found a posting at an international firm looking for an accountant who could work with European branches. At the interview, when they asked for proof of her German, she spoke calmly and fluidly. She saw the HR manager's eyebrows rise. "Where did you study?" the woman asked. "On my own," Ariel answered with a little smile. 8 months of evenings online and from books. "Impressive," the manager said. "We appreciate people who show that kind of initiative." She got the job. The salary was 1.5 times what she'd been making before. The work was challenging and sometimes exhausting, but for the first time in forever, she felt respected. She was on video calls with colleagues abroad managing accounts, solving complex problems. Her language skills weren't some silly hobby. They were a key part of what made her valuable. Meanwhile, the bank approved her mortgage application. Steady job, declared income, good credit history, boxes checked. Rayner waited patiently through it all. Every so often he'd call and ask, "How are things progressing? Need any help?" "You're incredibly kind to wait this long," Ariel told him one day. "Most sellers would have moved on." "I told you I'm not in a rush," he replied. "And I see how hard you're working to change your life. That deserves respect." Eventually, everything fell into place. The papers were signed, the money transferred, the keys dropped into her hand. Ariel stood in the empty living room, her living room, and turned slowly in a circle. Sun poured in through the large windows. The rooms were bright and open, the view stretching to the park and river. "This is mine," she thought. "Mine." Rayner had left a few pieces of furniture as promised. The sectional sofa, the dining table, the bed. The rest she added bit by bit, a lamp she loved, soft curtains in a color she chose, plants she picked for the windowsills. Every small decision filled her with quiet joy. In the evenings, she attended an intensive course on international accounting standards, building on her new role. There, she met people like her, folks who wanted more from life, who weren't afraid to start over. During the third session, a man about 45 sat down next to her. He was tall, with warm brown skin and thoughtful eyes. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. "Go ahead," she said. "Julian," he introduced himself after class, offering his hand. "Ariel," she replied. They started out just as study partners, reviewing notes, comparing answers, working through difficult cases over coffee. Then the meetings shifted. Sometimes they went out for a bite after class and talked about everything but numbers, music, childhood memories, the weirdness of starting over in midlife. Julian told her he too had gone through a divorce recently, that he'd stayed too long in something that ate away at him because he was afraid of what came after. "You're incredible, you know," he said one evening when she'd finished telling him the whole story. "To walk away like that and rebuild? Not everyone has that courage." "At my age," she teased, "some people would say it's too late." "Your age," he said smiling, "is exactly when you know enough not to waste time. That's a gift. Most people stay stuck in misery because they're scared. You were scared and you still moved. That's different." "I was terrified," Ariel admitted, but staying scared felt worse. Over time, their friendship deepened into something gentler, warmer. Julian never rushed her, never pushed for more than she was ready to give. He just showed up steadily, consistently, kindly. They went for walks in the park, tried out new restaurants, ran errands together. Ariel learned to trust the quiet way he listened, how he didn't talk over her, how he treated her opinions like they mattered. One evening, they sat on her enclosed balcony with 2 glasses of wine, watching the sky darken over the city. The lights flicked on one by one below them. "I'm really glad I met you," Julian said softly, taking her hand. "Me too," Ariel replied, and this time the tears in her eyes were from something bright and tender. A year had passed since she'd stood in Rayner's living room and heard that devastating sentence in German, a single phrase that had shattered one life and pushed her into another. Now she stood at the window of her own condo, looking out at the city embroidered with evening lights, and traced the road behind her in her mind. From the silent, invisible woman tiptoeing around her own home to someone who chose her own path. From the wife who hid her interests to the woman who used them to build a new career. From a person whose worth seemed to depend on another's paycheck to someone who made her own decisions and owned her own keys. It had been hard, messy, lonely, terrifying at times. There had been nights when she held herself and cried into her pillow, days when nothing seemed to move forward, when the paperwork felt endless and the future looked blurry. but she'd kept going. One small step at a time, she'd climbed out of the place where Leonard's voice had kept her. She'd discovered strength she'd never known she had, and now standing here in her home, she knew that what had felt like the end was, in fact, a beginning. Her phone buzzed on the table. Ariel picked it up and saw Julian's name on the screen. "Hey," she answered, smiling. "Yeah, I'm home. Of course. Come over. I'll see you soon." She ended the call and looked back out at the city. A whole new life stretched in front of her, hers to shape, hers to live. I'm really glad you stayed with me through this story. If it touched you, show a little love by liking the video and subscribing to the Harlem Mama Stories channel. Let's see how many of us there are. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. I'm always curious to know where my listeners are listening from. And if you'd like to support me a bit extra, you can send a small tip. I share new life stories with you every single day.